My grandfather, who you see up on the wall over here, um, he worked for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, the Wichita Herald, the Miami Herald. No, he had his own newspaper during it was a newsletter during the Dust Bowl. Every letter was on a rod, yo long. He'd lay, and work the machine to get Granny through the Dust Bowl. It was a little family in the Midwest. And he told me when he was healthy in his 80s. Um, when I was young, I knew all the answers. Now that I'm old, I'm happy to know some of the right questions. Um, it's a good idea to have a question. My question is pertains to the parallax, the the two storylines pertaining to the Ukraine. Over on one side, you have the standard story, which is that um, Mr. Vladimir Putin tried his level best to reason with successive Bush and Clintons, whacked out Southern former lynch artists from, you know, the creepy farms of strange movies, which the Bushes were, and the Southern Baptist queer wardens, which the Clintons were. And their complete gross ineptitude when it came to Russia, having been, getting ahead, like Obama would say, getting ahead by playing up on the Red Scare routines. Oh yes, the Democratic Party are solidly anti-communist. La 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 la. Bush Clinton interchangeable Southern weirdos lied and expanded NATO and encircled Russia and pushed for hypersonic missiles and abolished the ABM. God help me that I once said that Star Wars anti-ballistic um, missiles should be looked into. God help me that I ever said that. As a substitute for arms control, yeah, I was in a state of gross confusion. Because people would love to be able to get rid of nuclear missiles, but to lie and say that you're avoiding anti-ballistic missile treaties, and then encircling someone who you blindly hate after they capitulated on many terms. They tore down the Berlin Wall, and they just said, just be reasonable. We destroyed the country of Iraq. Oh, that's being reasonable. After what we did to Central America, we're wiping out peasants and children and bishops in their churches and calling it anti-communism. That's being reasonable. It's not being reasonable. It's not even being the United States. It's being a sad, like fringe leadership that managed to get into administration by assassinating the people who had the courage and intelligence to speak out and formulating other policies that were more responsible. Okay, that's one line of thinking. I mean, you can distort it into, oh, Putin is a fascist who's aggressing for Russia, but it's the same idea, which is that NATO and Russia got into it over the Ukraine. Push came to shove over the Ukraine. That's one wing of the parallax. The other wing of the parallax is that the hidden transcript in Texas school book was adopted by Gorbachev. Gorbachev went along with the AIDS attack, as did Nelson Mandela, as did these horrible, stupid ultra brilliance of Seattle. The anti heroism of Seattle is beyond conception. And all of these anti heroic leapfrog oligarchs pulled back and said, we're going to thin the herd because here comes the storm of climate change. We'll release COVID, and then we'll divide up the spoils and make mean so that nobody can say anything about it. So there you have the parallax that's going on. Don't position Putin with your slanders against the United States and so on. I mean, they sat on their hands. They didn't do anything. It's as anti-heroic as Seattle. In fact, Seattle's whole claim to heroics has to do with the the genie of the untouchable Russian um, eccentricity that only they have the nabob to fathom human conceptionally. The brilliance of Seattle. It's Parallax. And it gets very intimidating because we've allowed the Republicans to tax and spend, lie and lie, and play huggy kissy with the axis of evil behind the scenes with Peter Gabriel and Robert Flip and Martin Sheen and this West Wing behind the revolving bookshelf of the Howard Stern show, meeting with Putin and so on. And they say, oh, this is leading to World War III. Well, the bottom line is that there's a parallax view. And my question is, which is it that's going on? Because the evidence on my desk suggests that the Russians and the American intelligence system just decided to let stand the Texas school book, which exists, and lie about me for some bizarre reason as a way of not saying anything or doing anything. And then they get this show going to say, well, we can't anymore. It's out of the question. We have more important things going on. Like, wait till the floodgates open of climate change, and then nobody's going to be able to second guess this monolithic backstabbery by the Axis system that arose from Hollywood. Of course, it's Hollywood who's controlling the media and the presses and stuff. What else could it be? I mean, the Russians are not the heroic. They're not being heroic. They didn't come and say, they didn't call me on the phone and say, Jim, we know from the University of Pittsburgh that those letters from Gail Burstyn are some kind of really super hot crime that needs to be investigated. Please cooperate with us. Neither did Reagan. Reagan didn't do it either. Neither did Clinton. Neither Obama was like, no, man, I get the girl. No, man, I get the girl. And from what I can see, the Kremlin itself decided to put a Putin guy, a Putin, for, Putin, as a symbol of their cooperation on the holy order of the Texas school books, police state totalitarianism towards who gets the hanky pank consensually. And they're going to put a stop to that. We're going to get monkeypox. We'll do whatever we have to. We're going to stop it. And it's not overpopulation. It's the sacred Taliban of what women are really for and who owns them. And they talk up the West Coast poets. All those are all women. What's this? They have no conception of consensual interaction. That's why they hated me so bitterly, was because I did. They said that my restraint, my courtesy, my contract with my partner, that it was always and forever and only consensual, was a form of blasphemy. And they contorted into an allegation so absurd that they used it to run amok. And this is the credibility standard of their status quo. The Russian and the U.S. credibility standard is all of it standing on the Fernhollow Bridge of the idea that virginity proves rape. And it's doing like this: creak, creak, virginity proves rape, creak, creak. And that's the Fernhollow Bridge of moral awareness and credibility. So when we talk about mature, restrained partnerships, we should talk about who we expect this from. And as the Fernhollow Bridge of moral equivalency goes creak, creak, because something's not playing in a fashion that is suggestive of mature restrained partnership. Okay, a mature restrained partnership is when people comprehend that the explanation that they're being given or that they're sharing and giving themselves is in accordance with what really happened. So we have a parallax view. I mean, I'm certainly on board with the idea that the invasion was very bad and a lot of crimes have been committed as a result of the invasion. I'm certainly on board with the idea that NATO pushed it and refused to deal with Russia honorably when there was a chance to deal with them honorably. And I'm certainly on board with the idea that people need to be advised of new circumstances regarding the other attacks that have been kept quiet. But I'm not going to say that poisoning me in the mouth before COVID, after using me for 2 Holocaust experiments, didn't happen. It did happen. They used me for a Holocaust simulation experiment where they kidnapped, tortured, and gassed me. And anybody who says that didn't happen should look at the context of the picture of me, a terrible trauma which emerged, which allowed a person to say with gusto that Robert Frederick King Crimson has, in fact, insulted the intelligence of every man, woman, and child on earth as a point of fact. Number two, they used me for a Holocaust experiment on Mount Desert Island. And then they pulled all this Ouspensky stuff and said, oh, Lenin this, Lenin that. So what, I mean, none of it was true. The evidence suggesting Lenin was, death was all tabloidism. That he actually snuck away so that he could help pull this off. That, and then saying that's not true doesn't explain their explanation one bit. How do you have monkeypox to the rescue of the victims of AIDS? That's what they're selling you. That's what Yoko Ono is selling you. So that's the truth of the matter. There's a parallax going on. And the question is, what of that is it possible to stop dissembling about and put together so that people can come to some kind of comprehension about what the morons in Seattle and Pittsburgh have pulled? Now, of the Russians in Moscow, just as moronic, it looks that way to me. It looks like, the human race is dealing with leadership of morons who have literally no comprehension of the ability to face facts in a peaceful and honorable way so that people can work together to address the problems that are coming full steam down the highway as a result of imperial legacies from the Axis. Do you know what the Axis was? That's not a happy thing. The Axis were dishonorable cretins. They steamrolled over everything that they could get away with steamrolling over. And we've been hallucinating about them ever since. The Russians are clearly not the Axis. It's a hallucination. Okay, so if you want to say that what I'm saying is a hallucination, that's fine. But don't darken my doors and don't poach my poetry anymore, Baba. Because I'm on to you, Carl. I know what you have been doing to my dossier, and I don't believe for 1 minute that meaning is a human conjuring that's imposed on the world around us. Meaning is found out through careful questioning and patient hard work of investigation and thinking. You don't just poach. You don't just come out and kick a kid's brains in and deafen him and say, sex is good, sex is good, sex is good. Yeah, 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 we got the girl you want. That's not how it's done, Carl. That's how it's done in Pittsburgh, and maybe that's how it's done in Russia. But to raise a child honorably in a fair and equitable society, you explain things to them. You say, be careful what you touch. Help strengthen yourself, and don't make yourself vulnerable by not knowing what you're touching before you touch it. These are the kinds of things that you teach children. Okay, so don't come kicking any more people's heads in and then using their poetry to light off signal flares. Okay? Because I'm on to you, Carl.